everyone, and welcome to another edition or another interview. And today's guest is Barbara Roeling, and we're going to be talking about different sessions that we've gone through or different ways that we experience our awakening process. And some of the things that we do during that time is we connect with our divine self, our spirit guides, and our angels. So I would like to just introduce Barbara today. So Barbara, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself really quick?
Sure. I live in Austin, Texas. I'm a geologist that works for a bank. I have a son in college, and right now we're in that pivotal time frame, and a very unusual, very unique time frame of being in a pandemic. So he's home with us right now, and I'm loving it. So
that's very nice, very nice. And you know what? I do want to, because this is really funny how we met, and so I really want you, if you will, share the story. This is how divine guidance works. I just think it's so beautiful. So do you mind sharing that story really?
Of course. Yeah. And I agree with you. The synchronicities were just amazing about it. My husband and I went to the Llano Earth Art Festival, which is an event in Llano, Texas. And we just bought a trailer literally the day before. And we had spent the night at the RV park, and we were heading out straight from there. And this is right before they were starting to shut things down for the pandemic. And this particular festival was not shut down yet. So we thought, well, here's our opportunity to take the trailer and get out of town for a little while before things are going to get worse. So we go to the RV park, and we're about to leave the next day for the festival. And you come walking up to our truck as we're heading out of the RV park, and you wander up, and you had noticed that we had the exact same design of trailer, ironically called the Imagine. And you walked up and said, you and I have the same trailer. I need some help adjusting something in it. Is that something that you could possibly help with? And the more we started talking, the more I realized, and you realized, I think, that there was a connection there. And I told my husband, I said, stop the truck. We need to help. So then we went to your trailer to help you get things fixed. And we started talking and found out that we were on a very similar spiritual journey, and we're going through our awakening. And it was just, to me, remarkable. And as we left your trailer to head to the Earth Art Festival, I looked at my husband, I said, you see how this works? And he said, honey, I see this all the time now. It's no surprise that, this is going to happen along the way.
Yeah, so it's pretty incredible too. And I did this road trip with two of my girlfriends, and they're not really on this awakening journey yet. But they said, what are the odds? I mean, they looked at me after you left, and they said, what are the odds that you would meet someone who would talk about the same things that you talk about? Because they listen to me, but they don't always know or understand what I'm talking about. But it was so funny, because it's like, yeah, what are the odds that we would meet all the way out in Llano, Texas, town, middle of Texas.
I couldn't stop laughing because you're right. What are the odds? I mean, this is just how it works. So it was just, synchronicities are fun. Once you realize that there are no accidents, and everything is there for a reason, then it's fun to just kind of ride that wave and see what other synchronicities are going to happen next, because they do.
Absolutely. And that's kind of been my motto my whole life. I always say to people, everything happens for a reason. And my family says that to me all the time. Shay, you always say that. Everything happens for a reason. So I believe that. I live by that motto. But anyway, I invited you to come on today because I really would like to just talk about the awakening process. We are all going through that, especially right now with this isolation and all of the things that are going on in the world. This is really happening to force people to wake up. And everybody has gone through awakening at some point. And usually it takes some kind of an event in our lives that causes us to really start looking around and seeing what's going on. So I would just like to take some time and talk about your awakening and how you came to be where you are today.
Sure. There's a particular event that comes to mind that I think changed the trajectory of where my belief system was, and really kind of altered everything for me. And that was back in 2010. I had a girlfriend that I've known for 30 years. And she said, "You're not going to believe this. I just had a session with a medium and I spoke to my mom, and her mother had passed a couple of years before. And she said it was like talking, it's like having a conversation with my mother. You just wouldn't believe it." And it piqued my interest. I was like, is that really possible? Could that really happen? So I made an appointment with the same medium who I'm in Texas. She is in New York. So I thought, how does that work? How can you possibly have somebody in a whole different state across the country connect with me, first of all, and connect with, whoever? And so I set up a session and she explained how it worked. And I actually spoke to family members, and it was an amazing experience. And I've learned over time everybody does it a little bit differently, but it was indisputable. Being suspicious, a little, uncomfortable that this is all rigged, or it doesn't really work, it's all just a money-making scheme or something. I made sure that I didn't give any kind of questions that would lead the witness, or indicate that something they could find online or look up. And so I did that, and then my brother passed away. And I had been told by this medium, give it about 6 months for the person who has passed to kind of settle in, I guess you could say, on the other side. So 6 months to the day, practically, I convinced my brother and my sister to contact with me this medium in New York again, so that we could talk to my brother. And my sister is in Alaska, was at the time. She was in Alaska. My brother was in Seattle. The medium is in New York. And then, of course, we're going to talk to somebody on the other side. So we had the gamut covered as far as geography. And she answered all their questions ahead of time, because my sister and my brother had never done this before. And so we kind of set the stage. She explained how the other side comes in for her. And so then we started, we didn't say who we wanted to talk to. We didn't say what we wanted to ask. And she started telling us who was coming in, and it wasn't just who we wanted to talk to, and she didn't know who that was. There were other family members that came in as well, and she would, not specifically, but say generally, this is your mother on, your grandmother on your mother's side, or your grandfather on your father's side, or a contemporary. So she would narrow down, she did not know who we wanted to talk to, but she narrowed down to a contemporary of ours that she gave some descriptions that were very clear. For instance, she said, "I don't know why he's doing this. It's a male who says that he's related to you, a blood sibling from these same parents." And she says, "I don't know why he's doing this, but he is doing a 10 hut, like what you would see in the military, like a salute. And I have no idea what that means." Well, what she didn't know is that our maiden name was Officer. And he was also an officer in the military at one point. So he was confirming to us what the connection was. By this time, I'm in tears, because, this is just validating, our brother is here. That's who we wanted to speak with. So we continued along the line of questioning like that. And it was a beautiful experience, first of all, to have my brother and my sister in this experience with me. And to be able to talk to him on the other side and to ask him. And the questions were basically on the line of, how are you doing? Are you okay? What's it like over there? Kind of the basic.
What kind of responses did you get when you asked those kind of questions?
He, without giving any details from us, he made it very clear that he was happy to shed the body he was in. My brother had Lou Gehrig's disease, or ALS. So the end of his life was not a pleasant one. So he made it very clear that he was happy to shed that body. He was ready to let it go. And that our father was there to meet him on the other side. That he was spending time with his wife and his children. He was spending a tremendous amount of time with his youngest son, who was about 7 or 8 at the time. And so it
They
was
were still on this side.
on this side, correct. So our father was on the other side. And so our father met him as he passed.
Mhm.
So that answered a question we had of who was there was anybody there to meet you? You know, what's it like when you cross? So he explained that our father was there, and then he explained that he is still with us, very much with us, and where he's spending his time. And then he started giving brotherly advice, which was so fun to hear. You know, he was kind of nagging my brother about something that was going on in his life right then, and he was telling me he wanted my son to spend more time with his son because there were similarities in the losses of a father that we were experiencing. So this is coming through the other side. So it was just beautiful, and to me it was indisputable. However, in talking to my brother and sister afterwards, they remained skeptical. So even though I was hoping that this would kind of wake them up to what is really going on out there, at least ask some questions to themselves about, wow, is this really possible? How could this possibly happen? That didn't really happen, and that's okay. But it was a wonderful opportunity.
Yeah, it's so amazing though when things like that happen and people still don't, you know, I mean, they're still skeptical. I mean, I'm very skeptical too in a lot of that stuff. So I
Well,
get
I'm a scientist by nature. So I went into this skeptical the first time, and I made sure with my brother and sister to make sure that they wouldn't have anything to hang their hat on as far as it being a farce. But, you know, we're all on our own paths.
Yeah.
And so I guess I was just ready, and it completely changed my life. And so I had a couple more sessions with the same medium where I started asking bigger questions, because, you know, once you realize that's huge, there's way more than this life out there. What does that mean? What else is out there? What does this mean? And so I started asking those questions, like, when did life begin? And what is it? Is Atlantis real? Because there are all these stories about this, you know, mythical Atlantis that occurred a long time before history was known. And I got the answers to my questions, but what I realized later is the other side will meet you exactly where you are.
Yeah.
So the questions that I got, my questions were basic, the answers were basic. Because how would I understand any more than where I am? So as I started asking more questions and looking online and reading books and finding out more, my questions started getting deeper. And I wanted to know more and more. And then the answers started getting deeper. And that led me to more questions because, wow, okay. Had no idea what rabbit hole I was going to go down completely with this whole process. So I guess it was 2016, I guess, my husband and I were going to visit some friends in Colorado. And a girlfriend of mine had just recently moved there who was on her spiritual journey. And she said that when they moved to Pagosa Springs, she said there's a lady here that does a massage, but it's not a massage. It's energetic and it's spiritual. And she said they opened up some kind of record. And she said, it's something called Akashic Records. Well, I didn't know what that was, but it sounded cool to me. So when we got to Pagosa Springs, I went to see this lady, and I dragged my husband too. I said, we got to experience this. And I didn't know what the Akashic Records were, but she, with my permission, opened up my Akashic Records. And I went there with the same kind of questions that I would ask the medium that I talked to in New York. Deeper questions. My mother had just recently passed, so I had questions about my mother. And my mother was there, and she told me where in the room she was and what it was like on the other side, and I didn't need to call her my mother anymore. That phase of our relationship was past. And I was, other beings were there as well, that was my first experience to encounter other beings. And again, they meet you where you are. So it was a lot to process. That was about an hour and a half session. And then my husband had one as well. And it opened up so many unknowns to me that I started researching that. What do you mean beings? You know, who are these beings? Why are they here? Who are they? And I went back the next summer to visit our friends again and went to see the same lady again and realized what the Akashic records were, which I learned after that process and started processing the information during that initial meeting with her in Pagosa Springs. That Akashic records are the records of everything that you've ever known or been or seen. So you're opening up your entire history of everything you've ever been through. So
yeah,
it's
and
your own library.
In the soul regressions that I give to people, that's what happens. And I find when they leave their lifetime, they go and they record that lifetime after every single life. So there's everything imprinted or recorded in the Akashic record. So thank you for sharing and telling everybody what that is, because I know that it's going to be some people who are just watching this that are not familiar with the Akashic records. So
yes, it was all new to me. And so once I learned what it was, then next time we went back, I knew what I was working with. And another set of questions came up, and I was asking questions like, what is my soul family? And during that time, I found out that part of my soul family is a group of star beings called the Pleiadians. Like, what are the Pleiadians? Now I've got more homework to do. And she said, read up on everything you possibly can about this star family that you are associated with. And she gave me certain music to listen to, certain authors to read. And then there's now so much on YouTube that you can look at as well. So during that time too, they were so excited that I was there. And that I was ready to accept this information. And really, they gave me blessings during that time that were going to allow me to go deeper on my path. I'm like, deeper on my path? What do they mean deeper on my path? What path is that? What do you mean deeper? So again, I left that processing all this information that was given to me. And that was, the last session was 2017. And I listened to these sessions periodically, and every time I do, I'm further down my path and they make more sense as I go along. It's a beautiful process once we understand what we're doing. You know, once we wake up and we're on our path, we're so guided. It's just gorgeous to watch.
we are, and it is so amazing that you would take each little nugget from each little thing that happened to you and then expand that a little bit more and then ask more questions and move on. So can you tell us what you found out about the Pleiadians and what they are? I mean, other people may not be aware of what the Pleiadians are.
There are a number of families of star beings out there that the Pleiades stands for the seven sisters, which in astronomy are seven stars that are clustered. There's many different star groups in the constellation, but the Pleiadians are from the Pleiades, and they are a group of beings that helped feed Earth. Their DNA, they're kind of called keepers of the garden. They're part of the star beings that watched over the beginning of Earth and the beginning of humanity. So we're from them, one of the many races that we are from. So when everybody says, these are extraterrestrials, well, really they're us. We are them. Yeah. And so the more we come to understand that, obviously there's less fear with everything that we have been told about aliens and extraterrestrials and all that. And it's so comforting, really, to understand our true history. There are actually galactic historians that can lay out, because that is what they're remembering in this lifetime, is where we really came from. And so if we ask ourselves this question, who are we? Why are we here? We can get some amazing questions, because they want us to ask these questions. The part of the awakening is remembering who we are, where we came from, so that we don't feel like we're separated from others, that we understand that we all are connected, including those that are not on Earth, that,
right. And
they're here to help us.
it would help us. And that is what the awakening is to bring our true heritage out and let people know where we come from, who we are, what's going on in the planet. You know, there's a lot happening right now, and especially during this time of isolation, it's really given time for people to go within and find out and ask those questions. Why am I here? Who am I? And that's one of the reasons why I do soul regression, because I have so many clients who come to me and ask me, that's one of their main questions. Who am I? What's my purpose here? And where am I from? Because people are waking up to their true heritage and they want to know, where's my family, you know, or is my soul family? Is any of my soul family here? So many people feel so alone because they're in a foreign country. Earth is a foreign country to them, because we all answered the call to come here to help raise the vibration of the planet and work through this awakening right now. So it's amazing. I love being here and I love doing what we're doing. I do want to share something really funny when you were saying that, because when I was about 12, I was in the planetarium and we were in the sky room where they turn off the lights and then they go through the whole star system. And I remember when they said that the 7 sisters, you know, and they started talking about it, it resonated so strongly with me at that time. I had no idea why, but it did at the time. But I think a lot of it was because I have 7 sisters in this lifetime.
Oh, wow.
And so every time I would go outside or I'd be sleeping out in the stars or something, I always look up to the sky and I look for the 7 sisters. It's such a huge connection. So it's funny, you know, a lot of times people don't call it the 7 sisters. They, you know, call it.
Well, I also found out that the car, the Subaru is another name for Pleiades.
Oh, really?
And so when you look at the Subaru logo, there's 7 stars there. And so my brother has a Subaru, my sister-in-law has one, and I always wondered about that. So, you know, it's another thing that's.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
So now we talked earlier and you actually went for a QHHT session. So I wanted to just see if we could talk about that for a little bit, what you remember about it. And then you shared a story about what happened the day of your session. So I'd like for you to share that if you would. That'd be great.
Sure. And I'll back up a little bit on how I got to that, because even on this path, of course, I'd seen a medium, and then I went online, and there is a medium. There's not a medium. There is a gentleman that passed away early of suicide, and his mother was grieving so terribly that he came to her. And all these paranormal experiences started happening. She couldn't imagine what was going on. And it changed her life. Obviously, she woke up out of this. And as a result, she created a YouTube channel and a whole process around working with her son, because her son was now working with her from the other side, and she has a whole process for that. So I started watching all of these channeling sessions where her son was coming through to answer people's questions that they had about what's it like on the other side, and answer questions about things that are going on at this day and age. And so when I was watching this, there was somebody mentioned by the name of Dolores Cannon as a process of quantum healing hypnosis technique. And I was like, well, who's Dolores Cannon? And what's this QHHT or quantum healing that they're referring to? So then I went on that process of looking up Dolores Cannon YouTube videos and found out more about QHHT. And the more I saw of that, the more I realized that's a way to find out even more information, but from ourselves rather than from someone else. We're actually asking ourselves that through hypnosis. We're talking to our own higher self. So in that process, you go in with a list of questions to ask yourself, and you have this conversation with you, which sounded like a very unique and very empowering way to get the information. So I looked up QHHT practitioners in the Austin area, found one, and set up an appointment for a QHHT session with this practitioner. And the morning that I was scheduled to go for my session, um, this this very close girlfriend of mine for 30 years who had introduced me to this medium in New York a couple of years beforehand, her son passed away that morning. He was 20 years old and he had a seizure and passed away. And of course, she's hysterical. I'm hysterical because it was my godson. And I was like, I don't know if I can do the session. I don't know if the timing is right for this. And I started thinking about it. And I was like, well, the timing, there's a reason why it's happened the way it has. So this didn't happen by accident. So I'm gonna go ahead and go and see what happens, because I don't know what to expect under these circumstances. And so I was able to go under into the somnambulistic state. And I asked the questions that I had of myself. But part of this, I also wanted to ask for my friend if Michael, her son, had anything he wanted to say to her while I was receptive. And he came through and just essentially told her, I'm fine. Don't worry about me. Everything is fine. And so it was a very short, sweet, calm message to let her know that everything is fine. And she knows what that meant because she and I have gone through medium visits before. So it's not like she has to guess at what he's trying to say. So it was very beautiful for that to come through as part of the process. That was kind of a gift.
When he came through, did you feel a different energy coming through as he was speaking?
Yes.
Because I've had that happen. A lot of people will connect with grandparents or loved ones, wives, husbands, children who've passed on, and they always say that they felt the energy of the loved one come through. And I recently had someone do a session and they connected with their young children, and their children came through in a childlike voice, and they were actually speaking like they were 10 years old. So
in this case, Michael was diagnosed with autism, and my voice changed. And the message came through in a very short, simple fashion, very consistent.
The way he was spoken.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Pretty
So it was a beautiful experience, and I got a lot of my questions answered. Also, I did experience a past life. I was able to experience what it's like on the other side and see beings greet me on the other side, which is, I still remember what that looked like.
So what
that felt like.
Share that with us.
When you get to the point where you are leaving this life, you kind of feel yourself leave your body and go someplace else. You feel much lighter. And I was surrounded by beings. There were probably 5 or 6 of them. And I couldn't make out any details because this was ethereal. But it's like they were there to greet me and to welcome me. And so it was a very comforting feeling.
And how did it feel to be in their presence? So
loving and welcoming, and natural. Just a natural place to be. Like it was, because when I was leaving that body from the prior life, I didn't know, you don't know what to expect on something like that, but you almost feel it. And then you go into the state, which seems at the time very natural. So, there was no questions asked that's what happens. And I think I've only had one session, but it's almost like I would expect that to just be the way it is.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Well, and that's the way most people have experienced it. So okay. It's beautiful. Can you give us a brief synopsis of what your past life was that you experienced? Do you recall what that was?
I do. At first, it's you wonder if this is your imagination, right? And as things start formulating, I saw a locomotive. It was one of the, maybe from the 1800s, a big black locomotive steam engine with, steam coming out the top. And as things started formulating, there was a platform there. And I watched 2 people get off the train and meet me. And we proceeded through this particular life, and it turns out that I raised this, was not my child. I was raising a relative's child that came to stay with me. And as we progressed through this life, I found out when I started asking, what's the relationship and why am I seeing this? That child was actually my mother in this life. And so the purpose of seeing that was to show how we are connected and how we have played in each other's lives, the roles that we have played in our lives. And that's what I've come to understand more and more too, is we have agreements with souls to learn and experience certain things in each lifetime to progress. And we are there for that reason. So when we ask questions like, why did my father treat me like this? Or why did my spouse do this? When we start asking and finding these questions out, we realize that they're really just there playing the role that you asked them to play.
Absolutely.
And it's a very beautiful thing to start seeing how I played different roles. I found out what my role was with my brother when he was in this life and why those roles reversed before he passed. So it all makes complete sense once we start, finding out more and more about this.
Yeah, once you start on that journey and you start understanding it, it makes more sense. And I just want to share a real quick story. A friend of mine she's a friend now, but she came to me for a session. And well, she didn't really come for a session. I met her when I worked at the wellness center. And she was going through some really hard times. So I invited her to have a session. But her family had tried to poison her. And she almost died. And so she hurried and left. And she had told me, she says, Shay, they're reaching out to me right now and want me to forgive them for what they did. And she says, I hate them. And I don't want to forgive them. I don't want them in my life. And so when we actually went in there and we regressed her to the spirit world, then she saw herself sitting at the round table designing her life for this lifetime. And all those people in this life who tried to kill her were at that table. And she felt so much love for these people that were there. It was phenomenal. And it's like, oh my gosh, after her session, she just started crying. She said, because she woke up to realize that they were just playing the role, that they did that out of love, And so she had to really think after the session, like, how do I process this information? But what she wanted to learn was forgiveness and compassion. And what better way to do that, And she's still working on that because it is a process. It's not like you're going to wake up from this session and you're going to get all these answers and you're going to do it right now, because we have free will. And she can still choose to not ever forgive them. But it is a process that she's working on.
Yes, that's beautiful, because you're right. Much of this is forgiveness, of understanding so that we can let it go, to process and let it go. But some of these things aren't just this lifetime.
Yeah.
Some of these have a long lineage that we're needing to release, but helping to understand it is important. Is an important part of it. Yeah.
And that's what's my work has kind of worked into now, where people have anger or sadness or shame or guilt. And so I call my sessions soul regression sessions, because I've moved a little bit beyond QHHT and BQH and introspective hypnosis, and I've just kind of moved into my own modality. But one of the things is when they're experiencing shame or guilt, I want to go back to the origin of that shame or guilt. And a lot of times we're finding that it is in past lives. And so then we have to look at where it's coming from and if they brought it in here with them, or sometimes it's ancestral. So sometimes, like, we incarnate into a particular bloodline right now in this lifetime, because a lot of us are here to help clear up the bloodline because of the trauma that has been induced in previous lives, and that's really following down through the bloodline. And I know in my family we have a skin disease, it's called the Darius disease, that has followed through the bloodline. Well, I've recently found out that this bloodline is carrying a curse from many, many, many generations ago, where there was a lot of killing and, purging and just a lot of darkness. And so that was a curse that was placed on this bloodline. And I know part of my reason coming here is to help heal that bloodline. And I have been told that this curse stops here at this bloodline. So it's really beautiful, when you start getting into all of what these sessions do for you.
It is, and it's an amazing time when you think of how much is being released right now. And some of this, once we understand this, and if we don't resist this, we allow this to come up to look at, and forgive, and or just to release. You don't even have to know what it's for, but I found that there's times when I cry for no reason, but I know, because it has nothing to do with anything that's going on around me, that it's just coming up to let go of.
And that's something that came up in my session last year, that they were told, a lot of my people were told, just when the emotion comes up, just say, I release. Just accept it. Don't fight it. Just say, I release you. I release you. That's all you need to say. Or the Ho'oponopono prayer. I don't know if you've heard that. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Thank you. I love you. Those 4 statements will help release. So when you have this emotion coming up and you don't know where it's coming from, just say that Ho'opono prayer, or just I release, and just release it in love. And that helps clear. And when everybody is clearing their own stuff, we're clearing the grid for the planet.
Exactly. All we have to do is work on ourselves. And I have to tell you this one story of an experience I had when I was at my office. And I work in a business office, and I was reading an email that a colleague had written, and I read it, and I started shaking. And my breath started getting short, and I was just livid. It was an email, right? I mean, why would we have this response to an email? I don't remember ever having that response before, but I read it, and the email was essentially saying that something that happened was my fault. And I started sweating, my shortness of breath, and I stopped for a minute, and I was like, why am I having this reaction? And I thought about it all the way home, and I got home and I sat in a chair, and I started pondering this, and I said, what was I feeling? What was it I was feeling? And the feeling that I was getting, the emotion I was getting, was fear. It was a life or death reaction that I was having. I was scared to death of being wrong. And what happened in that spontaneously in that memory is I went back at a point in another life where I was under the floorboard of a house with my family. And if I made any noise, we would be discovered and we would be murdered.
Wow.
And unfortunately, because I sneezed or coughed or did something else, we were eradicated. We were discovered. And so that fear of making a mistake, don't do anything wrong or you could die, was embedded in my psyche. And so I sat there and I cried and I cried and I cried. Once I realized what it was, I could sit there and release it. I don't know, this hadn't happened to me. I was an email, right? But so much came out. I mean, my eyes were swollen and I haven't had that issue since, because I guess it was just time for it to come up and release. But if we repress that, right, if what we resist will continue until we allow it to come up, to be looked at and be released. And what isn't necessarily this life, right?
And right now, everything is accumulating to end all of like karma and trauma. And so time is speeding up and everything is coming to a center point. So all this trauma that we were carrying from multiple lifetimes that are going on now are coming to that center point. And so all of this is coming up for us to clear it. And that's why, people are feeling so much drama in their life, or so much stress or sadness or guilt, because it's coming up to look at it, release it, You know, recently I had a lady who come in, she had a major back pain. And we were able to go in there and find out that she had stuffed all of her stress that she had been experiencing, her grief and her sadness, like from her mom dying. She was just kept burying it and burying it and burying it, and it was lodged in her back. And that was causing her so much pain. So once we were able to look at that grief and what it was, and then we were able to release it, she doesn't have that back pain. You know, and that's another thing that's really amazing, because we were able to pull up her mother and have a conversation with her mother.
Wow.
Because she didn't have any closure on it, you know. It just happened, and it just like she didn't deal with it at the time. So when we were able to pull up her mother and have a conversation with her and talk to her, and then she was able to work through that stress and that grief and release it. And it was so beautiful.
Wow.
But that's why it's all coming up right now, is so that we all will look at it. And so if we could say to anybody out there right now, whatever is coming up, deal with it. Just look at it, release it. And when you say it spontaneously come up, you were just sitting there, did you like start getting visions of it, or were you meditating, or was it just an awareness of knowing?
I intentionally sat down and said, I really need to understand where this came from, because this was out of the blue. Why would an email create this response in me? So I did have a meditation practice. So it wasn't hard for me to sit still and ask myself that question, which is important to be asking ourselves these questions. And so I just sat with it, and I just asked myself, what is this feeling? What does this remind me of? And that's when I realized this was fear, and fear of failure, and life-threatening. And as soon as those words kind of came together, this image came up of this family under the floorboard. And once I got through that, and I realized, I just let it go. I mean, what else do you do, right? You cry through it, and you wait till you're done. But I did ask a girlfriend of mine who is a psychic about that, and I thought maybe it was during World War II, like maybe during Hitler's time, but it turned out it was in Austria in the 1800s. So same general concept, the kind of persecution that was going on. It was just a different date and time that it was found. But yeah, so I didn't expect to see it, but I didn't have to relive it, but the emotions certainly came up for it.
Right. Well, and that's what I'm experiencing, those emotions, like when people die in past lives and they're very emotional, like a war chief got killed in battle. And so when he got killed in battle, that energy stays with them. And that's what the sadness or the anger that they carry in. Because I had a guy come and he's like, I am so angry all the time, and I'm just triggered all the time, and I don't know what it is. And that's exactly what it was. He was killed in the line of, war with the white men. And he was so angry that that's what was triggering his anger in his life now. So really, really interesting how all that is coming through. So,
well, and I know that most of us want to say, okay, now we're done. But it doesn't really work that way, because this is a journey. There is no destination. That it's really unraveling all these layers, like layers of an onion, to release it for everyone else as well, like you said. And so it's kind of like, okay, what's next? And being open and receptive to allowing that to come up, because once we see how this process works, it gets easier. Yeah. Once we understand what we're going through, it releases easier. We feel lighter. Life gets easier in general, because you accept things as they come. It gets easier to accept it.
Yeah, and it's such a beautiful process. It is when you could go from this life that's just full of all this drama to just going with the flow. You know what I mean?
And noticing the synchronicities that happen every day.
Yeah, every day.
How people meet. And, we wouldn't be here right now if we weren't for those. So, but we have to be open and receptive to what the universe brings in front of us, because all of it's beautiful. Even the shadow work and the things that come up that we don't especially like, it's all part of that process.
Yeah. And there's one more thing I want to talk about before we end the session today or this interview, but we talked about earlier before we had the interview about some of the information that you get or got during your session, or some of the other spiritual practices that you did, that at the time it didn't really mean anything, and so you just kind of put it on the back burner, and then later it just kind of made sense. So can you share with us just a little bit about that process and how maybe some of the things that you've gotten at the time, it didn't make sense?
Oh, yeah. During the Akashic Records session that I had the first time, and even the second time, more information would come out. And I was told during the second session that my star family was so excited that I was there, that they were anticipating it. When is she going to get there? Good. Okay, let's put it on the calendar, because they wanted to share with me. They knew, energetically, we connect well before we ever get there. And so they wanted to share a lot of information with me because they knew energetically I was ready to receive it. So they gave many blessings. They opened up a lot of channels for him, and they said, this is going to put you solidly on your path. Things are going to change for you. And I was like, what do you mean it's going to change? I don't know if that's good or bad. And, I don't even know what a Pleiadian is. And so I was a little concerned about what this was going to look like. But it unfolded over time. So I would go on my walks and I would listen to the session, and I would listen to it over and over, because there were things that were being said that I didn't know what she meant. But over time, I understood what she meant. For instance, I asked the question, what is my purpose here? Why am I here? And she said, you are really there. There's energetic exchanges that you have with people. There's really nothing you need to do, per se. You just need to be. Because there's exchanges of information just by walking by people, through people and that didn't sound very fulfilling to me, because I kept thinking, well, I want to be on a mission, or, there's got to be something more dramatic. But over time, I've realized exactly what she meant when she conveyed that information of, we are all made of energy. And so we all have different roles that we play. And part of what is happening right now as people wake up is we're waking up to what we came here to do and came here to remember. And everybody has a different role. There's 7 billion roles on this earth as we all wake up. And I have come to understand and come to appreciate what was meant by that. Is one of the things that I will be able to do for people is to help ground them. And provide a safe energy, a calming energy for them as people wake up. It's really kind of scary. I mean, we're in the middle of a pandemic right now.
Yeah, and I mean, gosh, your energy is so needed, and all of the light workers are needed right now. And I've been being told this for about 5 years, that this time was coming. And I remember one time I was in a session with Dolores. I was in a session and Dolores Cannon came through. And she actually, thanked me for doing her work. And then she told me about this time is coming. And one of the most important things that you need to remember is to stay calm. Everything happens that's supposed to happen and the way it's supposed to happen. So just stay calm. And I remember her saying that. This was probably like 4 years ago. And then, of course, over this last year, I keep getting that in so many sessions, that so many of the light workers are here just to ground, or
yes.
hold the grid. Or
that's why we're here. Exactly. It's because there have to be light workers there that are the beacon, of the calmness. Somebody's got to ground the calmness here when things get wild. So yeah, I believe that.
Well, I so appreciate you for being a light worker, and so I'm so very grateful for meeting you. Is there any last thing that you want to tell our audience before we end this interview today?
Just enjoy this whole process that we're going through. It's a beautiful process.
Yeah. And you know what? People have a hard time with change. It's like one of the hardest things that people have to do. And I know that that's why we're here, though, is to help people understand that everything is happening for a reason, and to live in your joy. Do the things that make you happy. You know, if you enjoy working in the garden, work in the garden. If you enjoy playing with your kids, be with your kids. Enjoy your family time. This time is for us.
This is a gift. Yeah.
It is a gift.
It's a time to think about what does make us happy. And that's the gift that we can give everybody else, is just doing what makes us happy. And that's, everybody else will benefit from that.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Barbara, for being here with me today in this
interview. It's an honor.
Yeah, and I love you so much. Namaste. Thank you.
Yes. Talk to you soon.
Okay.
Bye.